You, the Game Master, have been prepping for this all week. At the tomb of Yalth, the dread necromancer Tunthgir resides, and the players have been hired on behalf of the church to purify the hill he resides on, so that the westernmost part of Othengir will be free of his necromantic influence. However, on the way out, the players become obsessed with a minor father, Father Ted, who runs the bread part of the soup kitchen. And, they're talking to him, trying to get him to do stuff, and he's just kind of like, no, I just run, I just make bread. Meanwhile, two players get bored of that and leave. They go to the tavern, and in a bar fight, they kill two people. And so suddenly, the entire party is run out of town, and they decide, let's just become wandering bandits. A classic scenario I'm sure most game masters have faced. Players are like cats. Maybe if you have treats, they'll follow along with your story, but generally they'll only do it if they want to. And if they don't want to, they'll go find something else to do that amuses them more. So let's talk about story in RPGs and what you, as a game master, can do to help facilitate it. By that I mean we're going to talk about what I do, and hopefully that advice is good for you too. So, I believe that there are two major types of story within RPGs. There's party story, and then there's player story. Party story is the adventure, what the group of characters is working together to achieve. Going to the tomb, killing Necromancer. And then there's player story, which consists of the player character's written background and what Bambino the fighter wanted to do in the moment, which was, hey, this guy insulted me, I'm going to punch him really hard. And then he rolled a nat 20 and killed him. And then it, turned into a ballroom blitz. Now, these two stories often are at odds, because even if you have a very wholesome group of players who do, there's this cool story, let's follow along with it, their characters are naturally going to get themselves into trouble, or try to have a spotlight moment, or, they love their characters. They want to show them off, and they want to do things with them. And, even when the two different types of story don't really mesh and things happen, that's still wonderful. RPGs, tabletop RPGs, are magical because unlike a CRPG, there are almost no limits for what can be done. Since you have a player game master, they can facilitate almost any situation, and you can roleplay it out. And that's okay. If the players want to destroy the Crystal Palace to show that they have agency and they can do what they want, if it's exciting, if it's fun for everyone, that's great. They should be able to do that. And, that's a little bit at odds, I think, with what a lot of people say, because I've watched so many videos, especially when I was first starting out, with advice on story and how to blend character backgrounds in with the main story to, try to keep them hooked. And it works with certain types of players, but I know, at least for me, when I'm actually playing a player character, if I write a background first, the character is going to be significantly different from the character in that original written background, because I discover my characters, who they are, their motives, what they like to do, as I play. I like to write my backgrounds once I have a good grasp on who I'm playing. And I have played with many, many other people who are the same way, but they may not just realize that. Players playing their characters at the table are very different than the ones written about in their little background stories. The PCs, the more you play them, they're gonna grow. They're like people, because they're played by people. And that's lovely. So, let's go over how I handle this. And before that, I guess I should say you should go watch my sandbox video, how to build a sandbox world, because that is integral to how I run my stories. That should be in the doobly-doo first thing, hopefully, if I'm not stupid and forget. So let's go over this. Session 1. Let's plop the players down right in front of the dungeon, because listen, you start them off in a tavern, there's going to be a bit of awkward role-playing as everyone tries to introduce themselves in a very inorganic way, because you've just forced them all to sit down at a table together. They're going to get distracted, they're going to start a bar fight. Start them off in the dungeon, because the best way to bring a party together is to have them fight together. When they are suddenly relying on each other to not die to skeletons, a sort of fraternity begins to form, and we'll discuss that fraternity more later, but that is extremely important to this style of storytelling. So session 1, in the dungeon, some people die, but the ones that survive, they get the loot, and they go back to town. Great. In the town, find a way to give them a map with the dungeon they were at, and maybe 1 to 2 other locations marked on it. Next session, this session, session 2, they will explore the town, they'll get rumors, they'll talk to people, and they'll kind of decide what their goals as a party now are. Generally, I find that goal is, well, let's go back to the dungeon to get more money and more XP. Nice and easy. Maybe a few sessions later, let's go, ooh, there's this just big tree marked on the map. Let's go there. There we go. You've already created that big tree. You know it's the sword tree, where there's this magical, gleaming mithril sword that has been embedded into the stump of a tree, and no one's been able to pull it out, and magic doesn't seem to affect it, so it's waiting for some hero to come and get it. Players all can't pull it out. They research it more by going back to town, and they find like, oh, okay, only a hero can pull this out. Well, okay, we're not total scumbags just yet. Sure, we may rob tombs and crypts, but, you know, that's the job of an adventurer, isn't it? How can we become a hero? Okay, well, Bambino, you may have killed someone in the bar fight, but you have the makings of a hero. Let's go make you do something heroic. Is there any big monsters around here we can set a devious little ambush for and cut the head off of? And so on and so forth. Now, in this style of storytelling, party story is determined by the players, and by extension, their player characters' motivations. We want that shiny sword. We're gonna find a way to get shiny sword. We want to get gold. We're gonna delve into the dungeon to get gold. We want to start a sewing business. Okay, who can we talk to start getting materials? And how do we get the money for this? So on, so forth. And the interesting thing about this is that suddenly, the players, though still focused on their own characters, think and talk with each other. And suddenly those character goals get weaved in naturally to the party goals because, well, they all generally will find they want the same thing. Or if they don't, it's like, okay, let's go do this first, and then we'll help you with this after. It's incredible. The players create their own investment in the game. And you facilitate this by dropping in, NPCs, lore, or locations. And as I said, when the players become obsessed with one of these, suddenly they're not just a minor or random NPC location or lore. Suddenly it's really important. So you write out more in between sessions about that. And your prep doesn't go to waste because the players already really like Father Ted. You wrote more about Father Ted. Of course they're going to talk to him. Father Ted mentions, oh, yes, no, I wanted to be an adventurer when I was young, so I looked into it. But, oh, goodness, I decided that really just the church was for me. I much prefer to help people. But you're adventurers, you know. I'm an old man now. But if I could help you maybe do what I couldn't, I have a bit of nostalgia for it. There's this dungeon that everyone was talking about, but no one's been there in years, of course. It's very dangerous. I could mark it on your map if you want. I could tell you a little bit about it, too. And look at that. They're like, Father Ted, we will do what you didn't do. We'll tell you stories, the adventures we had in this dungeon. And you know what? We like you so much, Father Ted. There's this artifact we found there. It's yours. And the father will go, oh, and then he'll help them out more because he's, oh, they're such kind souls. Oh, they're so brave. Oh, they're helping people. They're slaying monsters. It's this cycle, this feedback loop that is incredible. It works super well. And all throughout this too, as I mentioned earlier, this fraternity forms where not just the player characters kind of naturally want to help each other, but the players do too. Suddenly they're not stingy with their magic items. Sam, your thief is going to go out ahead? That's really dangerous. Do you want to, borrow any of my protection amulets or my, +2 cloak of protection? Yeah, okay, here, yeah. Just give it back to me, once you clear out that area, make sure there are no traps. It just happens. They naturally do it. It is wonderful. There is this wonderful cohesion that forms. It's just, oh goodness, it's excellent. And this comes from sandboxing it. So let's talk about, listen, I as the GM want to tell a story, but the players don't want to interact with it. It's unfortunate, but that's going to happen. So we're going to get to something I'm going to call background story. I want to tell the story of this evil cleric for the death god Baal. He's like, okay, I don't like this town. They worship Axis. They're goody two-shoes. I'm going to go to the sewers and start poisoning the water supply, causing rodents to go up and bite people. A plague is forming. If the players don't want to interact with that, fine. But there are consequences for that. If they leave the town for too long unattended, maybe everyone dies of plague, and suddenly it's just this barren area. It's a resource now that the players can't access anymore. And while if Father Ted's in that town, maybe suddenly they're like, okay, we don't want Father Ted to die. They'll either say, Father Ted, come with us, we'll escort you somewhere else. Or join our party. And if Father Ted's like, oh, but no, all these poor people, that would be awful. Father Ted might just be able to convince them, listen, if you do this, you'll be heroes, and there's fine rewards for that. And they'll go, okay, wait a minute. Not only will we not have a chance of getting the plague anymore, but the church says that they're going to pay us. And we trust Father Ted. Ooh, okay. Yeah, maybe we will go down there and slay that evil cleric. Or maybe the story doesn't have to happen directly to the player characters. So you see, I have this big binder. I call it the World Engine. It's this complicated series of tables where I write down NPCs, locations they've been, and other major things. It's a lot. It's hard to explain, but I roll on it after every session, and there's chances things will happen, and then I connect them to the world the players are in. So I rolled on it during one session, and we found that the king of the kingdom, the good King Roland, had died, and his young son, only like 24 years old, now inherited his father's throne, and he is in charge of the kingdom of Rolex. And then that event caused Cascade, which is another thing on the table, but essentially a crusade had started. And I rolled to see who was involved, and guess what? The new king was involved in the crusade. So that was some gossip the player characters heard. And they were like, he must be a really weak king then if he got himself sucked into that. The kingdom's already not doing the best, so that may have not been a good idea. And I was like, yeah, that's it. He's a weak king. It's not looking good for you guys or your kingdom. But of course they're like, we're small-time adventurers. We don't deal in that big politics stuff. Let's go back to the dungeon, So, there's been a time skip due to some shenanigans, because of course players love shenanigans. And that plot point is going to come back with a vengeance. Because this weak king, what could a weak king inspire? So I can't spoil that yet because my players maybe are watching this video. But in either case, you can still incorporate your own stories with the help of players to even make the plot points into the background. And there are ways to subtly encourage players to interact with them. And if they don't interact with them, hey, there's consequences for it. Now, let's talk about player death and how that can impact story. So, I highly recommend you watch my previous video on death, about bravery and heroism, but if you're returning from that, I will give you a reminder, just in case also you just haven't watched it. Goodness. In either case, just know that my players run multiple characters. They will have as many as I will let them, and I've had to put a hard limit on it. So generally, they play about 4 characters each, give or take. They'll leave some at home, maybe bring at least 2 of them on an adventure. They're in and out of the main adventuring party, but they're there and they interact regularly with everyone. But I have heard it said that in a game where characters die like that, it's hard to tell a story about the party even, because it's like the ship of Theseus. And I tend to disagree with that. Because of the player's investment in the party goals still stand. And if the players made the goals, and they're choosing what story they want to follow, I find that it generally doesn't matter. And beyond that, too, I find that players do a very good job of protecting their main characters, the ones they like the most. Now, however, they do sometimes still die, these major characters the players really like, that they have investment in, and that they've developed. So as an example, Stramer, right? He was a fighter who met a master blacksmith, but an insane man by the name of Dick. And the players, they really latched on to Dick, who was a minor character, just due to him talking similarly to, You know, I'd eat my neighbor. I'm Dick.
Charging into a goblin's nest to not get some goblin vomit and slop and blood on him. I just don't want to catch him in bed with a goblin.
The players loved him. They latched onto him. Dick got into some trouble. He was hiding out, and then the players are like, you know, you're a master blacksmith, and that's really helpful to us, but Dick, we just like you. So, yeah, you can come hide out at our house. Sure. So, of course, Dick's like, yeah, okay. You guys are giving me a lot of money for business. Yep. But Stramer, the fighter, he became obsessed with Dick. And Dick, of course, he's a big fella. He's a little insane. He knows how to fight. So he taught Stramer very unorthodox combat methods, specifically with a shovel. And then he made Stramer a master-crafted, sharpened shovel. So Stramer's this fighter who fights pretty much without armor, commando style, and uses a shovel to be very effective at taking down humanoid targets. Great character. We all liked him. But he died. It was unfortunate, but he died. Even though he did, he still had an effect on the party story. Between his magic items being divvied up, his body being given back to Dick, Dick saying, I will forge a new shovel in the blood of Stramer and find a new apprentice to train. Because of Stramer's interest in Dick, and, well, what he was doing with the party, even though he did die, he is still, in his own way, having an effect on the party story. And maybe he's just a minor example of that. And there are a lot of other characters, too, that die very unglamorous deaths and have been mostly forgotten by the
meat grinder.
But the players that are still alive press on. And thinking about it, all of my players, at least in my 3-year group, still have all of their major, favorite characters still alive, because they do a great job protecting them. The fraternity is there once again. They're still driving the story, they're still making decisions, they're still invested even when characters die. The party continues on, and so does the adventure. And goodness gracious, this all is an art. If you're a new DM, this can be very, very intimidating, and that's okay. There's so much for you to take in. It seems like a lot, and it is. But give it time, learn from various different sources. You'll do well eventually. Slow and steady. It's an art, a performance art where you think on your feet, and that takes time to develop, trust me. I used to suck, and I mean really suck at telling stories, at making just in general D&D games. And back when I really took on the harsher players have to die, there were some deaths that were kind of unfair. I can admit that. I've gotten a lot better now with time. It's about being experimental, being willing to take risks with your players. If something really is unfair, your players will tell you, and you can talk it out with them. Talk with your players, they'll talk with you, and over time, well, your intuition, your skills, it'll develop. And you'll become a great game master if you just stick with it. Practice, practice, practice. But goodness, with that, thank you all for watching. If you want to talk with me about D&D, join my Discord. I talk in the voice chat at least once a week, generally on Mondays. So you can come in there and ask me D&D questions or talk about it. Like and subscribe. I'm told that really does help hack the algorithm or whatever. So please consider doing that. But yeah, goodness gracious, thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you all in the next video. See, I'm editing like a little gleam on my teeth.